Hey everybody, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today we studied the really interesting chapter of Deuteronomy, chapter number 22.
Promise.
This is again another one of those chapters where you have almost rapid fire laws. So this is a wide variety of practical subjects for daily life within Israel. Now, here's what I want you to understand. It's amazing that we actually have this amount of detail of what life is supposed to be like in God's kingdom, in God's promised land to his people. Because we would assume, okay, that if God is leading his people out of Egypt and he has walked them around the wilderness for 40 years and he is now going to bring them into the promised land, a land that he has promised to their forefathers all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If there is any moment where we begin to think that when God puts them there, then it's going to be a perfect utopia. That because God is who he is and because these are his people, that it's going to be almost like a return to the Garden of Eden where everything is perfect and there is no sin. If you were ever tempted to think that, just read this law. Because the law is a divine demonstration that God knows the promised land was never meant to be the finish line for God's people. It was meant to be a home for a while they lived in this world, but it is not meant to be the final perfect kingdom that he has for his people. So the evidence, the fact that we're even reading these sometimes bizarre sounding laws is evidence that God has a better place and it can't be found in this world. So don't get too comfortable here, okay? Well, what'd you get out of this chapter?
So I see God's character. What we have been talking about as we read through the law, as we read through Deuteronomy, we've been talking about, I remind myself as someone who, I do like rules, but I want them to have a point and I want to have purpose behind that. And I remind myself that from the beginning, God, as creator, gets to define creation. And so as he's giving us these laws, he's showing us how to live. He cares about every single minute detail of our lives. He designed all of creation with intention and purpose. He created things to be certain things, animals. He created humans. He created them male. He created them female. And he has a plan, a perfect plan for every single one of us. And that includes our following him, our submitting to him. And so he cares about every single detail of our lives because the way in which we live is an indicator of where our hearts are. It indicates if we love him through our obedience, through our submission. That shows where our heart is. And so just like God tells us, when you move into the promised land, do not start doing the things that people around you do. Do not shave and grow certain hair. I don't know, you know, what the pagans did. Yep. Don't start looking like that. And he's also now saying, hey, you're supposed to dress a certain way. If you are female, I created you like that on purpose. I gave you that identity. And when people start straying, whether it's following a pagan people group, whether it's starting to dress in a different way from which God created you, you are straying from God's plan. You are showing that you are no longer submitting to God. You are no longer obeying him, and you're no longer finding your identity in who he is and who he created you to be. And really, this is a difficult topic. You say there's some bizarre things in here, but this is stuff we face even today. And so I love that God cares about these minute details and he knows what's best for us, and he gives us guidelines and train tracks so that we can stay close to him and follow him and keep our hearts in check.
Yeah. Let me hit a couple of just bullet points on this because there may be some questions that kind of go along with the content of this chapter. First of all, it's going to start out with, if you find something that doesn't belong to you, but you know who it belongs to, or you haven't figured out who it belongs to, here's what you do. You keep it safe, you remember it's not yours, and you get it back to whoever it belongs to. So in God's promised land, his people were not supposed to live greedily or selfishly. They were supposed to do what's right and what's just. They were also supposed to not ignore the needs of others, never to be selfish, and never ignore a chance to be a blessing to somebody else, which basically means we don't just treat our neighbors as neighbors, we treat our neighbors as they are brothers. And so we remember this. You get into other things. For instance, in verse number 5, where it talks about a woman not to wear anything that pertains to a man, nor a man put on a woman's garment, Tony Evans said this. He said, this is a reminder of the gender distinctions that God designed, that men and women equally share in bearing the image of God, but he has designed them to be distinct and complementary toward one another. Now, and then it jumps quickly. Like, look to the next verse. If a bird's nest happens to be on the ground before you in the way, or any tree of the ground with young ones and eggs, and the mother sitting on the young ones or the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. So it's a practical word here, like other passages where we find. And what he's saying is, he said, listen, go ahead and get the eggs. That's fine, but don't cut off the source of the eggs. So just a practical, this is how you manage the land you're going into, and you don't strip it of all of its valuable resources. He says if you build a house and you got a rooftop and you got a little place to hang out up there, you better build a rail, because if somebody falls off your house because you didn't design it in a way that was safe, that's going to be on you. And then the passage is going to end with violations against the sanctity of marriage. Nobody can read this passage and think that God does not care about marriage or behavior within marriage. And so it begins with this guy who begins to slander his wife because he doesn't want to be married to her anymore. And in verse 14, he's talking about he charges her with shameful conduct and brings a bad name on her. You know, the book of Proverbs is going to tell us that a wife is a gift to a man. And so what this passage is teaching is that man ought to guard how he talks about his wife in front of other people, and let a man think the best of his wife and not the worst of his wife. Then it's going to end this passage with laws about what it means to behave in a way that you're only supposed to behave in that way if you're married. God has a lot to say about that. He defines marriage, and the reason is because in Ephesians chapter 5, he says this was a mystery. He said people didn't understand this way back in the day, but we understand it today. That marriage was designed to teach the world how very much Jesus loves his bride, the church, in purity and in love and in relationship. And so these laws on marriage and purity remind Israel that home and conduct within that home are all under the authority of God. Even physical relationships are spiritual issues. So there's nothing in our lives, whether you are taking eggs out of a nest, or you find somebody's property in a field, or you find somebody's spouse. Everything is to operate under God's authority in God's purity. That's what this chapter is about. Now, we'll see you tomorrow in chapter number 23, and it'll be another exciting passage. All right, see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.